Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And Anne-Marie, we were talking in the green room about William Shakespeare and Stratford-on-Avon and who had the right house and who had the wrong house. And so we're getting ourselves into a good space, which is probably a good thing because we're going to have a conversation today with a guest who's going to share a number of, I'm sure, a number of stories that are a little eye-opening, a little surprising. She already shared one with us in the green room. She told us that William Shakespeare's house was actually not his house, which was kind of an interesting revelation. Like, oh, it's the one in the backyard. Okay.
I know, but I love it when I learn more about Britain from somebody from a different country.
Right? Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest. When do you ever do your own sightseeing in your own area? Nobody ever does that.
You never do you? You just take it all for granted.
Yeah. Yeah, well, except for her, I guess. She lives near Cape Canaveral, so, I mean, it's kind of hard to take that for granted. Because it gets
I used to
really
live near Boston.
Well, that's a different kind of noise. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to live in Massachusetts, so took all my kids on the Freedom Trail.
Well, did you also live near the Big Dig? I mean, that's a different kind of noise. That was crazy for the longest time.
Yeah, no, I was far enough away that I didn't have to
Far enough away. Oh, okay, good.
Echoing.
Yeah, that was the construction project that never ended. Well, yeah. It actually did. It ended eventually after,
that was
10
a
years
long time.
It was crazy.
Long time.
But anyway, June Edward is a psychic medium who didn't know when she was very young that she was a medium. She knew she was psychic, but she didn't know she was a medium. And I figured that's kind of like the place to start the story. So first of all, June, welcome. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And
I'm excited to be here.
Tell us the story. Tell us how all this came about.
So, a lot of kids see things, right? And parents will tell them, there's no imaginary girl standing there and there's nobody else at the table with you and whatever. When I was a kid, I would hear voices and I'd think it was my parents calling my name, and lo and behold, they're sleeping. And I'd go back to bed and I would see faces in my bedroom, and it would scare the bejesus out of you. You're a little kid. I was probably 3 or 4 years old. I'd pull the covers up over my head and the sun would start to come up, so I'd see the shadow over my face. It was very scary. And as I got older, I would go to school and tell kids what was going to happen before it happened, and you kind of get labeled as a little bit of a freak if you do that stuff.
Yeah.
So I was a nervous kid because I was seeing all kinds of stuff. I would bite my nails and I would stutter, and I was a mess from all this stuff. And I learned how to block it the best that I could growing up. I was 10 years old. My parents had split up, and I was 10 years old. I was doing the dishes. That was my job every afternoon after dinner. And there was a woman that would come in and keep me company and talk to me while I did the dishes every night. I didn't think anything of it. I enjoyed the company. So I asked my older brother one day, I assumed everybody saw her, who she was. And he started laughing at me and telling me that she was the woman that the guy killed in the house. He threw her down the stairs. And I'm like, oh my God. I was so scared that she must have felt it because she never came back. And like I said, I tried to block it. When anybody died, they would come to me and I would tell my family, I'm like, such and such a person died last night. They're like, yeah, no way. We just talking to him. Sure enough, they'd find out that he had passed away. Yeah. So weird things like that would still happen, even though I tried to ignore it. And, I've been in business my whole life. And you have to have a very analytical, focused mind for all that. So when other things happened, I tried to just ignore it the best that I could. And I was having a lot of stress in one of my businesses. And I went to have some Reiki done, which is energy work. And she recommended that I meditate to try to relax. And I'm like, there's no way I can meditate. My brain does not shut off. I was running 5 businesses at the time. I'm like, I'm a little yo-yo up here right now. I can't meditate. And the first time that I sat down to try to meditate, it was like someone kicked the door into the other side.
Ooh.
I could not turn it off. It was just like when I was a kid again.
That must have been scary.
Well, it was again, because now I'm working in my own business. I'm working 6 and 7 days a week. I was running 2 of my own businesses at the time and going through a divorce. And I was a medical esthetician as well. So I was taking the overflow. So I had 5 clients that day. And the first one that came in, I started to do her facial service. And I'm like, this is weird. Did your aunt just die? And she's like, yeah, a couple weeks ago. I'm like, oh. I'm like, did you just clean her house out? She's like, yeah, last weekend. I'm like, oh. Did you find one of those sock puppets from the 1950s that looks like a monkey? I mean, how random is this stuff, right? And she's like, yeah, we found one in the attic. I'm like, oh my God, this has got to stop, right? So the next one comes in. I'm like, listen, I got something really weird happening to me. I don't really know what it is. I'm like, suddenly I'm just kind of knowing these things and I'm not sure why. She's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, now stuff starts. And I'm like, do you live in a blue house, like a little cape type thing, like near the water? She's like, no, we live in this red old barn that was redone. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, is your husband in Florida? She goes, like, yeah, he is. I said, are you worried about him? She goes, well, a little bit. It's the first time he's ever gone there. I'm like, oh, okay. So we kind of finish the service and she leaves. And all of a sudden she comes running back into the room. She's like, oh my God, you got to see this. I'm like, what? She goes, this came through when you were doing my facial. And she shows me a message on the phone from her husband who's got the blue A-frame house on the water and says, look, I found out a new house in Florida. Like, oh my God. And so the next one comes in and it's almost Christmas time. And, I'm like, oh, I said, same thing. I said, I got something weird happening. I don't really understand it. I said, if I get some weird messages or anything, would you want to know? She's like, oh yeah, okay, sure. So I'm like, oh, I said, you have 5 Christmas trees in your house? She's like, I do. She goes, I do. I said, yeah, you get 2 upstairs, 3. I'm like, wow, that's weird. You been to my house? I'm like, no, I haven't. I said, but you have your daughter, right? You have a daughter that's 5? She goes, yeah, she just turned 5. I said, oh. I said, and I railed off everything she got her for Christmas. She's like, how the hell do you know that? You've been in my house. I'm like, I swear to God, I've not been in your house. I said, I know what your husband got you. You want to know? She's like, absolutely not. And it continually progressed. So the next girl that came in was really young. And as soon as she came in the room, there was a man in military uniform that walked in behind her. And I'm like, oh my God. So I proceeded to tell her the same thing. I said, listen, I got some really weird stuff happening. I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know how to stop it. I said, I seem to have this connection that's really happening to the other side. I said, if anybody comes through, would you want to know? She's like, absolutely not. I said, okay. I said, you're a widow, right? She's like, yes, my husband died last year. I said, okay. So now I got to talk to this guy in my head and tell him, listen, I'm really sorry, but she does not want to hear from you. Right. And he stood next to me for the entire service when I did the
great,
facials.
Of course, just what you needed.
I'm like, talk about unnerving. And from there, I had to find one of those awakening magazines and I started calling every psychic in there. I'm like, how do I shut this off? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, you don't know, don't you do? Well, I don't have that kind of ability. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So it's an old saying, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I ended up at a spiritualist church, and there was a woman who was a medium, and she happened to be speaking. She was from Boston. And I emailed her and followed her on Facebook real fast and told her what was happening. And she emailed me back and she said, I just happened to have a cancellation this afternoon. She goes, I'm in Boston, though, if you don't mind driving up there. I'm like, I'm there. So I went to see her, and as soon as I sit down in her office, she's like, so what are your abilities? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I just keep seeing people and hearing people, and I have all this stuff keeps coming to me. She's like, well, why don't you show me what you can do? She goes, bring through one of my family members from the other side. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. They just show up. And so she's like, well, just close your eyes then and ask for them and see what happens. So I did that. And oh my God, I brought through all of her relatives, like 3 generations back on both sides. It was
getting crowded.
insane. Oh yeah, so when I do mediumship now, it's insane. If somebody's sitting there, I'll have 100 people on the other side, like in a semicircle around me. Yeah.
Are they all talking at you at the same time?
Because I was not trained back then, yes, they were all kind of busting in and trying to want to talk over each other. And she's like, wow, that was a lot. She goes, that's great. She goes, I never really met my relatives from the other side, from the Irish side, from the potato famine. I'm like, alrighty then. So then she's like, the doorbell starts ringing again. And I'm like, she's ignoring it. And I'm like, the doorbell's ringing. She goes, yeah, I know. She goes, the house is haunted. She goes, and it's that old woman that used to live on the land. And, I've told her that she's not allowed to be here. And she started ringing the doorbell right before you came. So she must have known you were coming. I'm like, okay. She goes, well, maybe you can see, get a grip on her or something, or tap into her or something. So, well, sure enough, I tapped into this old woman who was not on the property. She apparently was banished from the property, but she still has a lot of energy. So she's ringing the bell, and she's standing on the edge of the property, and I'm seeing her like banging on pans to try to make noise and try to disrupt what's going on, even though we're not really hearing it. This is what she's trying to do. So when I left, again, I was not trained, didn't know what I was doing. I'm in my car and I start driving down the expressway, and all of a sudden I look over and she's in my car. I screamed. I had papers on the front seat. They all go flying up in the air. I'm pulling over to the breakdown lane ready to have a heart attack.
An appropriate place, the breakdown lane for the breakdown. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm like, you can't teach me fast enough how to turn this stuff back on.
Right.
So it was wonderful. I took quite a few classes with her. She was my first teacher, and then I found another mentor after that. And I spent about 1.5 years in training before I started working on learning on who to talk to, who I'm talking with on the other side, how to turn it off and how to turn it on like a light switch so that I'm not working all the time. And then my education took over from the other side. So the rest of the things that I've learned, they've taught me from the great beyond.
Okay. Wow. I imagine that you get this question all the time, but we have somebody in the live stream who's wondering if she can ask questions. So I'm just broaching the idea to you. We didn't talk about this before. I probably should have brought this up before, but
so as I said, I turn it on and off like a light switch. So right now I'm not working, but she's always welcome to book an appointment with me if she'd like on my website at juneedward.com, and I'd be more than happy to help her.
Great. Right.
Yeah, if you don't turn it off for other things, then you're constantly bombarded.
It makes sense. It totally makes sense, especially if it comes through. I mean, I've talked with many people who have various levels of psychic ability. Clearly, you are at the top of the list in terms of how strong and clear and accurate.
I've been told by many psychics and many mediums that my abilities are beyond, and I attribute that quite honestly to having died at the age of 27.
Really?
Yeah. I had injured my back when I was first married. I was around 22, and I needed back surgery. And I knew if I had the back surgery, I was going to die. I just knew it. And I put it off as long as I could. I had 2 children, and I was bedridden for the last 3 or 4 months of each pregnancy because of my back. And after the second one, it just got really, really bad. And I was told that if I wanted to have any more children, I need to have the back surgery, or my disc is literally going to explode and they're going to be picking out pieces.
Wow.
And, I'm like, I know I want to have my 3rd child. I'm supposed to have him, and I know that. But I was still very afraid that I was going to die. And my husband and my family's like, oh, you're just scared. Don't worry about it. And it's like, no, I just knew. And the night before the surgery, they did an MRI with a contrast dye. And I did let them know that I thought I was allergic to the contrast dye because I'd had it once before, and it literally took me hours to get off the table. I was so sick from it.
Wow.
And what do I know? I'm 27 years old. I'm not a doctor. And they're like, oh, that's no big deal. Everybody has that reaction. I'm like, oh, okay. So as soon as they injected me with the dye, I coded. And
Wow.
I left
That's
my
fast.
body, and I went to heaven immediately. And now I never considered it to be a near-death experience. They call it a near-death experience because scientists have not been able to quantify it yet and repeat it. That's why it's called that. I always considered it a death experience because I knew I died. And
To be honest, I'm not sure what the difference is. So that makes sense to me.
They call it all an NDE. They call it all near death.
Yeah.
And less than 1% of the people that have had a near death experience get to the point that I did, where you get a full life review. And it's literally like watching I got a life review. It's like watching your life in a movie. All the people that made a difference in your life, all the happy times. It's even to talk about it still, it's just so emotional.
Imagine.
It's amazing on the outside.
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah,
I've had a number of guests on in the past who have had NDEs, and always the same story. Is just amazing.
And a lot of people that come back commit suicide because they can't recreate.
They want to go back.
They can't recreate that feeling here, but they can. They can recreate it if they learn how to meditate and get in touch with their soul. They can recreate that high vibration that there is on the other side, and it's amazing. You can get yourself right back there again, and that's what I do, and I do it every day. I do it all the time, but I attribute my connection to, when your soul, which is pure energy, goes into that light. This is where quantum physics come in, and you're now traveling at the speed of light. And when that soul comes back into my body, it's still at a much higher vibration than it was when it left. And I believe that's why that I have the ability to connect as quickly and easily. And I've been able to bring through anyone that anyone asks for to come through from the other side, which to me is amazing. And I only know that because when I was, again, first training, for the first 2 years, I was reading angel cards at events like everybody else starts out doing. And the second year I went to the event, before I even got there was a line of people waiting for me because they had heard about me the previous year. And I did 15-minute readings for 8 hours, and I was exhausted. And when I was ready to pack up and leave, this woman that was sitting at the table to my right with her mom, who was about 85 years old, says to me, "Do you think you could do one more reading? My mom's been waiting for like an hour and a half. She wasn't going to stand up in the line." I'm like, "Sure, I'll bring her on over." So I asked her, I said, "Do you want a reading or did you want to talk to somebody from the other side?" She's like, "I want to talk to my son." I said, "Okay." I said, "Do you want to talk to your dad for us? I'm pretty sure that's who's been standing next to you for the last hour and a half." She goes, "Okay." So I can only give what I get. And a lot of mediums, unfortunately, are afraid to be wrong or embarrassed, so they don't. So I said, "Well, would he have had one of those cars that you hand crank?" She goes, "I have no idea." I said, "Okay." I said, "Would he have some occasion to wear a tuxedo with a top hat and one of those short little canes?" She goes, "Yep, that's my dad." I'm like, "Alrighty then." I said, "I think this is your mom that came over." I said, "She's wearing a crown and she's wearing this beautiful jeweled, but looks like a prom dress or something." She goes, "Yep, that's the picture I have of them over my fireplace." I'm like, "Oh my goodness."
Okay.
So, he proceeded to say that he was a little disappointed that her son died and didn't have any children and that no one was carrying on the name. I found out later that they were socialites from Newport, Rhode Island. Very well, big family. And so I said, I passed on the message. And then she goes, "Well, I still want to talk to my son." So I had her call her son, and I described who showed up next. And she's like, "Oh, no, that's my brother." I said, "Okay." I said, "Do you want to know how he died? Who murdered him? Do you want to know who murdered him?" She's like, "No, I think we got the murderer." I'm like, "Oh my God, really?" So he's like, "He just wants to thank you for raising him." He said, "You raised him, his parents didn't." She's like, "Yeah, that's accurate. I raised him. Our parents were socialites, blah, blah, blah." So I'm like, "Okay." She goes, "But I still want to talk to my son." But okay, I said, first, your brother wants your father to know that he had 2 illegitimate children, so the name would have been carried on, but he did not. And his mother, his sister's like, oh my God, who is it? And he said, well, I'm not going to tell you. You know one of them. She goes, I thought so. And he goes, I'm not telling you the other one because I don't want you to start any trouble or go looking. So I called her son again, and still he didn't come up. So I asked her brother on the other side to go in the crowd and get him. And I literally see him go into the sea of people, grab someone by the arm and pull him out. And he stands next to me with his head down, and that is a symbol for me. So they don't talk a lot on the other side sometimes. So if they don't talk, they give me symbols that mean certain things to me. Mm-hmm. So standing there with his head down like that means one of two things, that he either feels like he let her down or she thinks he committed suicide. And I'm like, you think he committed suicide? And she goes, yeah, he committed suicide. And as soon as she said that, his head pops up and he's like, I did not commit suicide. It was an accident. I'm like, he's saying it was an accident. He didn't commit suicide. As soon as I said that, the sister comes running over. She had wanted to sit off the side to give her mom some privacy. She's like, I knew it. There was no suicide note. He had the TV on. He had a new girlfriend. He was cooking dinner. The police just kept saying it was suicide. I knew it wasn't. So I asked him what happened. And the first thing he said was he had a different medication. He was on a new medication. And the mom confirmed that, yes, he had some mental issues and he was on a new medication. So then he told me that he was watching TV. So I'm getting something. I'm getting something with his neck, right? But it's not a hanging. So then he shows me that he's watching TV and they were juggling chainsaws.
Oh,
so he went down to the barn to see if he could do it. He was juggling a chainsaw and it slipped. And he beheaded himself. And his mom is like, yeah, he beheaded himself. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. Absolutely insane, crazy accident. And I'm like, it was an accident. So his mom starts bawling her eyes out. She's like, I've tried to talk to him. I've tried to get him to come in my dreams. I said, he thought you were angry at him. He thought you were upset with him. So he wasn't going to be able to come through. And he was all crying and upset on the other side as a soul, as a spirit. And, he couldn't see her, but he went over and hugged her. She said she could kind of feel the energy. But after, it's like, I asked her, I said, this happened like 45 years ago. Why didn't you come see somebody like me before this? And that's when she told me she had gone to see every medium she could find for the last 30 or 40 years. And I'm the first one that was ever able to bring him through.
Oh, wow.
So had I been able to do that for her 30 or 40 years ago, her entire life would have been different. She was she was broken and frail. She thought she caused him to commit suicide because she was so tough on him. And she'd been carrying that burden all those years. So I didn't care who called me crazy after that. I knew I was doing what I was supposed to be doing.
Wow. I have had a few interviews like this one. This is one of those occasions, Anne-Marie, where I'm saying, what do I want to ask next?
Whoa, what is going on? This is like the second time in a month I've seen you speak.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is November craziness or something, because Anne-Marie can tell you, June, I'm normally not at a loss for questions.
So it's been an interesting journey for me, and quite honestly, they teach me something through everything that I do. The first year that I had gone there to do the readings, it's actually at an Elks Lodge, which is an old mansion in Newport. And the first year that I went, there was a paranormal group that was doing ghost tours on the second floor as we were doing the readings on the first floor as part of a New Year's Eve event.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the guys comes down, he goes, I heard you were really, really good. He goes, do you want to come up with us and see if you can see anything? I said, sure. So I had no idea they were filming anything. I just started going up the stairs and I stopped at this, at the first threshold. And I'm like, I forgot that they don't see what I see. I'm like, do you see them? He's like, no, who? I said, there's two people standing here, two black slaves, a man and a woman, that are dressed as servants. They're standing at the stairs. I said, their daughter died here. She fell down the stairs and broke her neck. goes, oh man. He goes, we get lots of really weird feelings when we go down that staircase. I said, that's why and at the time I wasn't trained enough to know to move them on. I wish I had, but I didn't know. So kept going. He goes, oh, come on up here. So it was known to be haunted by like a 10-year-old girl. And they had toys on a chair in the bedroom, hoping to, record her or see her or whatever. So we start down the hallway, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, there's rooms on either side. I'm looking in the rooms, and I'm like, there's women in all these rooms. I said, was this place a brothel? And they're like, well, no, it was, I forget what they said it was, but they said before that it was a brothel. The building that was torn down before, it had been a hotel that had a reputation as a brothel. I'm like, oh, well, that's what's still going on in here now. And I looked into one of the rooms, and the door started to close on me. And that's when I noticed they were videotaping all this. They had a camera going, and I pushed the door back open, and I saw a woman kind of like standing behind the door in there. Then we went into the next room that had the little girl spirit in it, and she was in the closet. And I started talking to her, and she was the daughter of the woman that tried to close the door on me in the next room. She was a prostitute there back in the day, and she got pregnant, and she wasn't supposed to have the little girl there. And the man that owned the brothel, anytime she heard the footsteps, she would go hide. And she didn't hide one day. She got caught. Her mother got beat for it. So the mother was hiding in the other room. The daughter didn't want to see her. The daughter died in the room of either yellow fever or diphtheria or something. I was so deep into it at the time. I was almost in a trance state, and I was giving them the girl's name, the date of birth, the date of death, so they could go check out all the records, check the cemetery. And then they'd take me into the attic area. So they're like, we want to know what you see in here. So as soon as we went to the attic area, the attic was full. I'm like, this was on the railroad, the what do they call it? The where they freed the slaves, the Underground Railroad, where they freed the slaves. I said, this whole entire attic is full of slaves. They're like, well, describe for us who you see. I said, they're almost all women and children, but there's a man in here that looks like he might be slightly, retarded or something, and he's got one arm. It's cut off at the shoulder. They're like, somebody else had described him before. So then they want to know what was in these boxes. I'm like, there's nothing in the boxes. I said, there used to be pictures in one. There was an ammunition in the other. I said, they're hiding up here because they're afraid. They're still afraid. And when they died, they were afraid to go to heaven. They were afraid to go into the light. They didn't know what was going to happen. So they went back to the safest place they were at. And they were safe in that attic. So they all went and huddled back there again. I've seen that many, many times with, like the Irish and the Italians that came in and were hiding because they were here illegally. I've seen that a lot of times. But now I know how to move them on. So now I move them on. Back then I didn't know. But I was like stupefied, and I was like, I don't know how I drove home that night. I lived an hour and a half away. I have no idea how I made it home. I was still like out of my mind, not understanding what just happened.
How do you process something like that? Because, I mean, what you're describing, I'm kind of sitting here imagining if I was somebody who experienced things the way you did, and I knew that nobody else was experiencing it, that disconnect, that seems so severe. I'm not sure how you bridge that.
It's a matter of trust, because I'm seeing them, and I've been seeing them, and I've kind of been seeing them my whole life, not to the degree that I do now. But it's just like me trying to explain heaven to you. You can believe it or not believe it, but when you die, trust me, you'll believe it.
Well, I believe that,
yeah.
I mean, you have to internalize. You have to handle the fact that most people aren't seeing it. You are seeing it, and it is so obvious to you and so not obvious to them. That's the disconnect I'm talking about.
Well, they were able to look up facts and fact check things to show that what I was picking up and what I was getting was accurate.
Some validation.
Yeah. So I just have to understand and know that I'm not this suit that you see. You're not the suit that I see. We are the soul that's inside, the energetic soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been blessed to be able to see people's souls. When I was a kid, I looked somebody in their eyes. I could like transfer my soul into their body and know them from the inside out. It was really weird. It was really freaky when I did it as a kid. But I see your soul. I don't, I see what your soul is. I see who you are. I don't just see your suit. So for me to see the energy and the souls that are still here, they're just the same thing with no suit.
Okay. That's interesting. It's interesting because I was asking myself the question, how, if I'm in your shoes, how do I reintegrate everything? How do I make sense out of it all? Because you've got these massive amounts of data that don't correlate. At least they don't seem to on the surface. And you have to find a way to correlate them.
Yeah, I did a lot of meditating and a lot of connecting with the other side in order to get answers, because I had a lot of answers. I had a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I had questions that people that are here for the most part can't answer. They have to be answered from the other side. And I was blessed to have teachers from the other side, souls that were willing to help me and give me the answers that I need and explain things to me, because, and it's interesting. It's like everything they do, they teach me something. Everything that I've gone through, I've learned something else. I had never really seen true evil, and it exists, absolutely exists. You can't have one without the other. Everything in the universe has to be in balance. And I had a woman who kept contacting me from Connecticut that her family was getting attacked by a demon. And I live 3 hours away, so I kept trying to get paranormal groups there. I couldn't get anybody there to help her. So I had to go there myself and help her. And I did get a paranormal group to go in and record it and film it. But I had to trust that I don't, I work with the light. I work with the angels. I work with whatever you want to call it, God, source energy, Buddha, whatever you want to call it. There's only one. And that's where I come from. And I've been in the light, and I brought the light with me. And the devil is very afraid of that. And I trust in that. And when I got to her house, I really didn't know what I was going to encounter, to be honest with you. There were a lot of souls trapped in the house. There was, like I said, there were immigrants in the attic from Italian immigrants that had been there. There were Irish immigrants in the basement. And the demon that had followed this woman from house to house was feeding off of all the souls that were in this house. They feed off fear. And I chased this thing around a 3 family, and it was afraid of me. And I could hear it swearing at me and growling. And we stopped at one point, and the camera, the guy that was doing the audio played back. I'm like, can't you hear it growling at me and swearing at me? And they're like, no, we don't hear anything. So they played back the recorder, and they picked the whole thing up on the recording.
Oh, really?
It was all picked up on the recording. They could hear it swearing at me and growling at me. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing what electronics will pick up, because it's just like, it's just like an animal. A dog's eyes the cones are different than a human's. So they see what we don't, right? And I see what most people don't, because I am able to pick up on the energy. So when they form, I'm picking up energetically on the form. It's a little different pickup, but the same concept.
It makes total sense to me. It really does make sense. And it makes sense that the electronics could pick up what a human would not necessarily be able to pick up for the exact reason you just gave, because electronics can pick up a wider range of stuff. So it just, it makes sense.
It's a different frequency. It's what frequency are you on? And we're all energetic beings. So you have to get on the frequency to be able to pick it up. That's all it is. But yeah, I learned about evil in that house. And, I felt so bad because, her son was getting bit by this thing. And she pulled his shirt up to show us the bite marks, and they were forming as she was telling us.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
That's pretty wild. That's great.
If it wasn't happening to me, I'd have to wonder if it was real.
Yeah. Sure. Well, that's pretty much, that's your entire story, is dealing with that realization. And that's what we're talking about here. That's what the whole conversation is about. Anne Marie, I mean, you're listening in on all this stuff, and you often have questions or comments. I'm not sure you have anything, but I thought I'd ask anyway. Do you have anything that you want to bring in?
No, I mean, I just love this, and it reminds me of of my childhood, because there were so many things that used to happen to me, like doors opening, doors shutting, people seeing, smelling things all the time, and it just kind of gets shut off. But my parents were quite open to it, but I think it scared me. But I hear it, like my mum passed away in the summer, and literally for about 6 months before she passed, she had dementia. My daughter had been hearing her. And like you said, she just thought it was me calling. You just hear her go, yeah, I'll be there in a minute. And, you just knew that she was hearing things. And then my mum came to me in a dream. And it's funny how, you switch it off as you grow older. And I'm just trying to, with my daughters, because both of them kind of sense things, just trying to go, oh, isn't that cool? Somebody's come to see you. Yeah. And not be scared of it.
But you got to be careful too, because evil does the same thing. Evil will come through. A lot of times, if they have they'll come through as children. They'll come through. My son had an invisible friend when young. He called him Urfy, and I wasn't too sure what the deal was with Urfy, because again, I was trying to block things. But I didn't get a good feeling from Urfy. So I kept telling him, no, Urfy cannot come to dinner. No, Urfy cannot play with you. Urfy needs to go. Yeah. But what I found is that, I lived in haunted houses my whole life. I didn't realize it's because we attract them. It's the same frequency. If you're, they gather in certain places, because if there's one there, they'll call the rest. And if you're on that same vibration of them, then you're bringing them in. So I tell everybody to make sure that they've got religious things in their house. I have my crosses blessed by a Catholic church because it seems to work the best. I use holy water. I have that blessed at a Catholic church as well, because again, it seems to work the best. And every room of my house has a statue or a picture or a cross or something. So if they're wandering in off the streets, they turn around and walk back out.
Some guests who have been on the program who have psychic abilities have talked about different things that they do to protect themselves, to create protection. And it's a wide range of things. I can't remember if anybody has told me specifically that they use Catholic ritual methods. But
that's to protect your area. Protect your area. If I have to, for whatever reason, I found that I'm not, I don't adhere to any one religion. I've been exposed to a ton of them. My sister was Hindu that passed. And I've just found that on the other side, especially when it comes to anything evil, that seems to have more power for them for some reason. Maybe because it's where I live. I don't know. So I just make sure that I have everything blessed. And even in my car, I have a rosary hanging from my rearview mirror, because if they're ghosts, if they're stuck here, they can't move any faster than you or I. I've worked on missing person cases, and I cannot tell you if the person is dead unless I get a high vibration and know they've gone to heaven. If they're still stuck here, they feel the same as you or me. It's the same low energy vibration. So they can't move any faster than you and I either. Once you've gone into the light, those souls can come and go like this. Seconds. They can go anywhere and everywhere. But if you have not and you're stuck here as a ghost, they can only get around like you or I. So they'll hop in your car for a ride, literally. They'll get in and get out where they want to get out. Just like the witch was in my front seat there, that woman that I didn't even know she was there. So I always tell everybody, make sure you have something in your car that will ward them off, and they'll be less likely. They still may get in, but it's not going to be somebody that's evil that's going to get in. And there's a lot of evil.
It sounds like the biggest challenge is, this is based on what you said, distinguishing between, assuming you realize that you can make this kind of connection in the first place, that you can detect this kind of thing. The challenge is being able to distinguish the difference between somebody who's still alive and someone who's passed on but hasn't gone into the light. It sounds like they're identical.
Well, no, they're not. It's the vibration is different. So everybody's walked into a funeral, right? And felt the vibration of a funeral. It's really, really low energy. And then you walk into a wedding or a big New Year's Eve party, right? And the vibration of the room's really high, right?
Right.
That's the difference. When you learn how to pick up on energy, you can easily pick up on the energy of whether it's a soul that's gone into the light that's coming to visit you, or whether it's a ghost that's been hanging around and doesn't belong there.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's the difference.
So even if you're hanging out at a particular moment in time with somebody who's in a really depressed state, you're still going to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You'll pick up on the energy. You'll know that person is this person, and whatever else is coming in, you'll feel it. It's just like, so you know when an electrical storm is going to start?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden the hair starts to stand up on end on your arms or the back of your neck. It's the same thing. It's the same feeling. So you'll know that there's a difference there. But yeah, you always want to protect yourself before meditation, before you do anything. I've consulted with a lot of authors from different countries on different things because I can see things that other people can't. So they would send me pictures to look at. So at one point in time, someone sent me a picture of, it's called a scribing bowl. And it's literally a bowl of water that you take a picture above it. And in the water, a scribing bowl will reflect whatever is happening in the area. Okay. It's like taking a snapshot in time kind of thing. So he sent me that to interpret what I was seeing in it. And I had no idea that it came from a house that they were writing a book on and investigating that was owned by a sorcerer back in the 1800s. So I'm telling him everything that I'm seeing in this, and all of a sudden, I just protected myself, regular archangel, that's it. I didn't do anything elaborate like a salt circle or anything. And as I'm telling him what I'm seeing, I started developing a sty in my eye. Literally within 2 or 3 minutes of talking to him, my entire eye closed up, swollen with a sty. That took more than a month to go away. But if you think back what the old sorcerers would do, they'd send a sty in your eye, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, and then he starts telling me that, the house was owned by a sorcerer. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You should have warned me. I would have done something else. Just because they're not on this side, they've got a lot more power on the other side now because they don't have a body. And he's pure evil. Mm. They did not want the information getting out that I was giving because it's like anything else. Happy people attract happy people, right? Misery loves company. Mm-hmm. When you've got low spirits like that, evil spirits like that, they attract more evil spirits. And the house that he was writing a book on he was writing a book specifically about a missing boy, because they were taking pictures in the barn, and all of a sudden the picture that they took had a full face right in the picture. Wow. And it looked like somebody's school picture of a boy. And come to find out, the boy had been murdered in the barn, and he was taking a picture of a ghost, and that's what set the whole thing in motion. And they wanted to identify it, but it's a crazy story. He did end up publishing the book in Canada. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I never
know what the day's going to bring.
Well, I'll tell you what it's bringing with me. It's bringing my questioning back. All of a sudden, the questions are starting to form in my head. So, which is good, Well, because I really tapped into something you said earlier. You talked about how you learned so much from doing this, and from the abilities that you've developed over time, and from the connections you made with people this side and other side,
right,
through what you do. I can very much identify with that because that's very much the same experience I have here on the podcast. I get so many perspectives from so many different people who come onto the show. So I really get the value of that. And I understand why that would be really attractive to you.
Well, we're all here to help each other, right? It's great.
Yeah. Well, we're also here to learn. We're here to,
we're
here to develop ourselves too, right? I mean, it's both really.
Well, our 5 lessons.
Our 5 lessons.
5 lessons. That's my book, All's Fair in Love and Karma. We're here for 5. Yeah, we're here for 5.
That's a good segue into that.
We're going to segue right into the book. Forget the question. Tell us about the book.
So we're here. Our soul has to learn 5 specific lessons before it can advance. And I learned about this because I developed a 7-week program online about 4 years ago to help people that are having trouble with their relationships. And by running hundreds of people through the program, I learned that they're all here for the same things. So then I started asking more questions from the other side. And sure enough, these are the lessons we have to learn for our soul to advance. And this is why we get into relationships, okay? They're either karmic because we owe someone something from a past life, or they owe us. They're here to teach us something, right? Or they're soulmates, which is going to afford you a little bit of love and comfort while you're learning that lesson. Well, there's twin flames, which is a whole different subject and a whole different level. But we're all here for the same lessons. And some people can learn them all in one lifetime, and some people can't. And if you don't learn them, you're going to have to come back to learn the ones that you're missing. And each lesson reinforces the next lesson. So the first lesson is self-worth. And self-worth is not the same as self-esteem. Self-esteem and self-value is what other people think of you. Self-worth is an accumulation of all that. It's the understanding of there is only one of you. In this entire world, this entire universe, there's only one of you. Aren't you unique? Aren't you special? Right? That's self-worth. And it's learning that putting yourself first is not narcissistic or selfish. It's where everything else comes from. Because if you're not here, how are you going to help anybody else? You're not. So you have to learn how to put yourself first. The next lesson is trust and communication. You have to trust that there is a plan and there is a higher power and that nothing is happening by accident. It's all happening for your highest and best and for your good. And you have to be able to trust people enough to communicate to them your wants and your needs, because no one, osmosis doesn't work for people to understand what it is you're looking for. Even if you're deaf, dumb, and blind, you're going to be able to somehow communicate to someone what you want or need. And, you have to be able to trust them enough to be able to communicate. And even sex is just another form of communication. If you can't trust someone to communicate outside the bedroom, you're not going to be able to do it in the bedroom. It's just another deeper form of that. And they're tied together. Okay. Then you have unconditional love. And unconditional love does not mean, oh, my husband beats me, I can't leave him because I love him unconditionally. That's not what unconditional love is. Unconditional love is knowing that maybe your journey with that person has ended and it's time for your journeys to part because they don't bring you joy or you're moving on to something different. But it's being able to love them and let go of them and wish them well. That's what unconditional love is. And a good example of that would be for somebody that had a child. Suppose the child did something horrific, like murdered a neighbor accidentally, but they ended up in jail for it. You don't like what they did, but you're still going to love your child, right? That's unconditional love. Then you have money and balance. And everything in the universe has to stay in balance. You have the dark and the light, the day and the night, you have left and right, you have top and bottom. Everything has to stay in balance. Our energy has to stay in balance. So you're not going crazy when you have a full moon, right? It's all about balance. And we use money in this 3D world that we live in to show whether or not you are in balance. You're not going to walk into a grocery store, get $100 worth of groceries and give them $1,000 for it, right? I mean, prices are getting up there, but still $1,000.
It's not going to be too long, but yeah.
Feels like it.
Yeah, I know. But it has to stay in balance. So you have to give for what you get. Okay. Hence the reason that people like I charge, because what I'm giving you is of value and you have to get kind like that. Okay. This is why when you go to work, you do your job, you get paid in money because it has to be an equal value. Okay. Then you have patience. And patience is one of the toughest for people because we live in a society now that it's all about instant gratification. Everybody wants everything now. You've got a cell phone with text messages. I texted you 10 minutes ago. You haven't called me back yet.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. They want, you drive through fast food because I want it now. I don't want to take the time to make it. And it's not how things are supposed to work. You have a plan and everything happens in the time that it's supposed to happen. And you have to trust that that time will come for you and everything that you ask the universe for, they will deliver in the right time.
Wow. Fascinating. Really interesting.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
I'm much more interested in the book than I was 10 minutes ago. That's for sure. I am. Yeah. Yeah. I'll be getting that. Well, I'm kind of thinking, all right, I'm going to go off in some of the questions I was going to do before, but I'm thinking also now I kind of tie it into what you're saying about the book. So let's go this way. You put the book, whenever an author puts a book together, there are different reasons why they do it, but very often they feel compelled by something in their life to do so. And I would be kind of surprised if you didn't feel some sort of drive, something that compelled you to do this. What compelled you to write the book?
So I'll be really honest with you. The only book that I was ever compelled to write was my autobiography. And I started writing that when I was 20 because I'd had such a very difficult life. And I had a challenging life because I wouldn't be able to relate to the people that I help if I hadn't walked a mile in their shoes. Okay, it's very hard to help someone if you can't understand or haven't been through what they've been through. So sure. I've been through pretty much everything, okay? And I'd started it many times, and my kids would find it on the computer, and I'd have to delete the whole thing because I didn't want them knowing what my life had been like.
Oh.
And my mom was put in the nursing home. I put her in at the age of about 90. And I was keeping an eye on her 3-4 times a day in the nursing home, and I started writing the book again. And at the same time, I was teaching mediumship and psychic development. And I just kept hearing, you've got to write the book. You've got to write the book. And I'm like, I'm writing the book. And they're like, no, not that book. I'm like, what? They're like, you got to write another book. I'm like, what other book? They're like, you got to write a book about what you're teaching. So you students have it and you can help other people. I'm like, oh. I said, I don't have enough hours in my day. I said, if you want me to write that book, then you're going to have to help me because I can't. And I asked for the highest of guides on the other side, and I channeled that book and wrote it and published it in 6 weeks.
Wow.
That was my first book. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then I published my autobiography after, and then I did this book. And again, this book, I had no idea what I was writing or why I was writing it. I just knew that having learned what people need to learn from doing my program, that it changes their life so much. You know, they've gone from 0 to, 1,000, and they turn their whole life around. And when you learn how to maintain the law of attraction and you learn why you're here, I have one guy, he was just out of prison, lost everything. Good upstanding guy, got caught in trouble, was selling off stuff that wasn't his. He got caught, small town, everybody shunned him. No one would talk to him. His wife divorced him. His kids wouldn't talk to him. Did 6 months of prison, came out, was ready to kill himself. Prayed to God, found me. Literally, I popped up on his computer, right? And did the program. Within the first year, he wrote a book about his experience in prison. Went and got a franchise for a food truck, which he always wanted to do. His daughters started coming back around. He started making money and made amends and paid back everybody that he had taken money from in the town. They all came back around and rallied around him. Then he opened up a whole brick and mortar business. And now his wife's dating him. So everything he ever wanted is coming to him because he learned his lessons and connected to his soul. So when I started writing this book, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm, all over the place. How do I get all this? And literally they just, all I do is ask and they channel it through me and help me to put this into words to get it out to people. I literally do the work from the other side. I truly believe that. And really it hit the #1 bestsellers list. And again, it wasn't from me. It was the angels.
And congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It also occurs to me, you mentioned law of attraction. You mentioned how you just received it, and you just downloaded it, and it was quick and all that kind of thing. All that tells me is that you have extremely low levels of resistance. You just let stuff through.
Oh, so absolutely not. I'm like the most stubborn person you'd ever believe.
But you somehow, you somehow find a way to let it through, though. Otherwise it wouldn't get there. How do you do that?
So again, your brain is your brain is nothing more than a computer. It sounds
like you're getting nagged all the time, June.
Yeah, no, your brain is nothing more than a computer. And did you ever get ringing in your ears?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's how they download your brain. When you get that ringing in your ears, you're literally getting a download in your brain. So pay attention when that happens. Because in the next couple of days, you'll suddenly know something or have information that, I don't know how I know this, but that's what happens. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Yeah.
So am I right
It's
in
trust.
saying, that despite the fact that you have resistances, there are times where you're just kind of able to be open for a moment, and that's when it all gets through?
Well, you have to be open. You have to trust. I know who I'm talking with on the other side because I know the vibration. I've been back there enough, and I know. So I trust whoever they're bringing through for me and the information that they're bringing through for me. I trust it. It's not steered me wrong yet. I could tell you story after story of the things that they've done for me in my life that would just blow you away. Seriously. When I tell my kids, they're like, wow. But they're here to help. I mean, it's like angels are not human. They were never human. They're a different race. Okay. And there's rules no matter where you go because there is things to do in heaven the same as there is here because everybody has to stay busy, right? So the angels can't help you unless you ask. But when you ask and you understand how they communicate in binary code and numbers, they will bring you and help you with everything. I always ask for a parking place. Whenever I pull into a big mall or anything else, I ask the angels to guide me to the front spot. Sure enough, I get a spot right near the door every single solitary time. No matter who's in my car, they're taking bets in the back seat. No way, Mom. No way. It's Christmas. Not happening. Look, there's nothing to be found. Boom. Car in front of me stops to pull out.
Yep.
They listen. They're there to help you. That's their job, to help you. That's all they're here for. So you have to ask and they will help you.
I wish we did have a couple more hours because I would love to hear some more of those stories. I have a feeling that they would just be really, really fun. But we are set on a 1 hour limit here. I don't know why, but we are. So I've done it all along, so that's why I continue to do it that way. But there are a couple things that I want to get from you before we part company for today. First of all, you mentioned earlier for somebody who wants to connect with you when you have the switch turned on, when you're able to help people, how do they find you again?
Yep, they can go to my website, juneedward.com. If you can't remember my name, go to 5lovelessons.com. That'll take you to my website as well. Okay. Very easy, 5lovelessons.com. And I have a free webinar that people can also enroll in if they'd like to watch that and see if it resonates with them on energy. And there are lots of podcasts like this they can listen to and learn something from. They can schedule appointments from me. And there's also links to all of my books. I also did a journal on there called the Destiny Card Journal, which the Destiny cards are the regular deck of playing cards, but they are actually the cards of the Magi. Our Gregorian calendar is based off of those cards, which I read. And they are numerology and astrology combined. So I did a great journal that people can buy, and 365 days they can look in there and see the birthday of people that they know and theirs and learn something about them. And they can also book a reading if they choose. Yep. Yeah. And links to all my books on there.
Okay. All right. And I'll make sure that we'll include a link to the website too in the show notes to make it easy for people to find them. Then
you can find me on Facebook too. Facebook, Twitter, all of those.
All the social media. All right.
All the social media.
Very cool. All right. That's good. One other thing that I need to do too, this is something that I've been practicing for the last couple of years now on the show, because I recognize that, you just mentioned some things, the social media, the other podcasts, all the different things that you put out with the webinar. Like so many people who come onto this show, you're constantly giving. Yeah, you're in the business, but you're also a giver. You just give to people who you often never meet, never see. Well, you actually might see them, but the rest of us. But I imagine there's probably some you actually haven't seen because there's so many of them. But my point is that there's so much of this content that is created through all the appearances you make and, your books and so forth that gets consumed by people that, you don't always see what's going on. You don't always know what's going to happen with them. You don't find out, how they benefit from it. And I always thought, that doesn't actually, not always, in the last couple of years, I realized that that's something we need to kind of recognize more because you're providing service to people and you're not really hearing back about it. Yes, I know everything remains in balance.
We're all a pebble. We're all like pebbles in a pond.
Yeah.
You drop the pebble and it's a ripple effect. Right. And we all affect each other. So I don't always need to hear back. I do get notes here and there and people will tell me, but I don't always need to know. I know that it's it's going out there where it should.
Well, I'm kind of funny about that. So I like to say on behalf of those people you've never met, you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, thank you for what you've been putting out there, because you are helping so many people in so many different ways. And I think you should be recognized for that.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It fulfills me just as much as it helps them.
And Marie,
really
what's your final summary for today? I mean, I always like to ask you this at the end, and I don't know what you're going to come up with on this one, but what's your takeaway?
I think my takeaway, what I loved, was those 5 lessons that we're here for. And even if you just do baby steps to improve your life, just in those areas, then that's actually achievable and beneficial beyond belief. So that's what I took as well. And also we've got some new listeners by the looks of it. We've got Miranda, Nicole and Jennifer popped in to say hello. So that's always wonderful to have new listeners. But yeah, those 5 lessons really struck a chord.
I agree. Yep. Really, really good. So, all right. Well, thank you, June, for joining us and for sharing all this really interesting stuff. Very interesting stories. Wow. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to those who joined us in the live stream, and thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.